Today we're in Rancourt. Now we've been to a lot of cemeteries on the channel, but today we're in quite a unique place because at Rancourt you have the British Military Cemetery. Just opposite it you have the French Military Cemetery, and just on the other side of it, just where these trees are over here, you have the German Military Cemetery. All three right next to each other here at Rancourt. So today we're at Rancourt. We're about 6 or 7 miles east of Montauban, and we're here to have a look at the three cemeteries: British, French and German. Now before I start, I should just take a second to thank Paul Reed. If you don't know Paul, he is a fantastic World War I historian and battlefield guide, and he runs the Old Frontline podcast. I reached out to Paul during my research for these three cemeteries, and he was fantastic. He's given me loads of really useful information and pointed me in the direction of where to do my research properly. So thank you to Paul, and if for any reason you don't already know about the Old Frontline podcast, you absolutely must check it out. I'm going to link it in the description below. So here we have the three circumstances. Now Paul described these three cemeteries being right next to each other here at Rancourt as an accident of circumstance, and we're going to go take a look at the three of them now. So we've come down to start just here in the German cemetery, and the reason for that is that it was the first of the three cemeteries to be established here. Like quite a lot along the German line, they built cemeteries behind their own lines, and so in 1914-15 the cemetery was built here and was used through till 1916. In the 1950s, other smaller cemeteries in the area were closed and the graves brought together here in Rancourt, and so it was expanded at that point. A lot of the graves here are from the southern sections of the Somme battlefield, so places that we visited like Montauban. The Germans that the British troops were fighting against, a lot of them will be buried here at Rancourt. Now, despite a bit of research, I haven't really been able to find any specific stories of men who lay here. Some of that's due to the fact that a lot of the more senior German officers and ranks like that were killed in this area were repatriated back to Germany, back to their own towns and villages. And so a lot of those soldiers who maybe would have more notable positions actually aren't buried here. But we do have lots of soldiers here. We have men like Otto Langhammer, who was killed in September 1916, and we have Karl Spree, who was killed on the same day, September 1916. So you can see the chapel here has got the writing on the side, and again somebody might have to help me specifically, but I would guess maybe it says something like "Here ruin," maybe "Here lies," something like that. German soldiers 1914 to 1918 here in the cemetery. And also there's a plaque here which I'm guessing was added in the centenary in 2016. Rose Somme 2016, created in remembrance of the soldiers of every nation involved in the Battle of the Somme. So if we go and have a little look in the chapel here, now this might be very dark, so we'll see if I can make this work for you guys. I'm hoping that we've got enough light in here. One of the soldiers, Joseph Danzer. I'm guessing possibly he is in the large grave here. So look, as we come out of the chapel, let's talk about the two mass graves. So we have one down there behind us, and the other mass grave is just here. So between these two, there are 7,492 men buried in these two graves. 7,500 men. Now sadly, only about 2,300 of them are known. The rest, like with many of the Commonwealth cemeteries along the Somme battlefield, are unknown. But there is a plaque along the front of the mass grave here to show us the names of the men who are known to be buried here in the cemetery. So as the rain starts to fall on us here, we've got the plaques that show us the names of thousands of German soldiers who are known to be buried in the mass grave here at Rancourt. In the two mass graves, I should say, the other one down there, the other side of the chapel. Something which I always find particularly interesting when you come to these German World War I cemeteries are graves like this one here. So this is the grave of Julius Bauer, and you might recognise with the star at the top that means he is Jewish. So on the 21st of March 1918, Julius Bauer fought here in the German Spring Offensive and died for his country. A country that just over 20 years later was going to round up other Jewish people, possibly his children or grandchildren, load them onto trains and send them off to concentration camps. The family members of a soldier who died here fighting for Germany. Okay, so look, a fascinating visit to the first of the three cemeteries here. We came to the German cemetery because, as we said, it was the first one established here at Rancourt. Now, despite it being a bit sunny, it looks like the rain is coming, so I think we're going to get our raincoats on and we're going to head just across the other side of the field there behind me to the British Cemetery here at Rancourt. So we've just moved over to the British Cemetery, and the British Cemetery was here in Rancourt next. Now, whilst the British were fighting in this area of winter 1916 and 17, this is largely a 1918 cemetery. So when the British were fighting here in the Second Somme Offensive as they assaulted the Hindenburg Line. Now, there's also a couple of World War II graves in this cemetery, RAF members who crashed or parachuted into this area, maybe were captured or prisoners of war or died in this region of France. Now, this is actually the smallest of the three cemeteries here at Rancourt. There's 93 graves here in the cemetery, and as well as being lots of 1918 graves, we also actually have a couple, or a few I should say, from the Second World War. Now, when you look at the graves here and you look at some of the dates, we've got Captain Curling and Private Toogood and Private Hickam. Lots of 1918 dates, so August 1918, August 1918, September 1918. So that'll be when the guys were fighting here in that assault towards the Hindenburg Line towards the end of the war. So there is one special memorial here for L.A. Reardon, who is a private with the London Regiment, killed here in 1918. Now, he is known to be buried in this cemetery, although the exact position of his grave is unknown. That's probably because his grave was marked when he was initially buried and then lost, maybe artillery fire or something like that. But it is known because of the records that he is buried somewhere here in this cemetery. So one just jumped out at me here. Here we have a grave for 4 soldiers, but the one at the top, Private Buckingham of the Civil Service Rifles, killed on the 1st of September 1918. He was only 19 years old, and it's just jumped out at me. It is better to die for others, dear lad, than to live for oneself alone. So I mentioned earlier that there were some graves here from the Second World War. So those were pilots who maybe had parachuted in or crash landed in this area. Originally they were unidentified, but lately, I believe as recently as like 2000, they were identified and their gravestones were changed, and they're now named here in the cemetery. So here next to each other we have Pilot Officer Light with the Royal Air Force, killed 21st of May 1940. We have Sergeant Hawkins, killed on that same day with the Royal Air Force. And then again on that same day we have Air Observer Sergeant Craig. All three Royal Air Force buried here at the British Cemetery in Rancourt, killed in 1940. Okay, so we've been to the German cemetery just on the other side here. We've been here to the British Cemetery, and now I'm going to walk probably about 40 yards to the French cemetery just here ahead of us. So now we've moved over to the French cemetery. This is a post-war cemetery, bringing together burials from all over the battlefield here. It's the largest French cemetery on the Somme, and it includes the graves of colonial troops who fought in this area. There's more than 8,500 men here, and that alone gives us a reminder of the French involvement in the Battle of the Somme. As we talked about in our last video, it's often overlooked, but more than 8,500 French Somme casualties lay here at the Rancourt Cemetery. Now, unfortunately, the resources available to non-French speakers when it comes to cemeteries like this are a little bit limited, so I haven't really got kind of specific stories as such. We've got a couple of bits to talk about though, so before we do, I just thought we would look at a couple of the men who lay here. So we've got the French graves, and I apologise sincerely for my pronunciation, but we've got Denarbon, Lara, Almery Marie, Morport, France, and you'll see that all the graves here have the Morport, France. So we've got Edina Vincent Carmino. So Morport, France is died for France, so all of the men here will have that on their grave, because of course they are the men who died fighting for France. Now, we mentioned that as well as the actual French soldiers, there were also the French colonial troops buried here. So here, for example, we have a Muslim grave to Lajal Bekamira Myra, Morport, France. So very possibly a Algerian, something like that, possibly from one of the Muslim French colonials. And when you look around a cemetery like this and you see the number of graves, I mean, we've been to lots of Commonwealth cemeteries with this number of graves, but this just feels like a field of graves that carries on and goes over the mound and beyond as well. Like I said, more than 8,500 Frenchmen and other French colonials who were buried here, killed in the Battle of the Somme. Now, of course, much like the Commonwealth cemeteries, many of those men are missing and have no known grave. And so there is here at Rancourt the chapel. Now, the chapel was paid for by the Dubos family in commemoration of their son Jean, who was killed here with his comrades in this area on the 25th of September 1916. And the chapel is there to commemorate the missing. So let's go and take a look. So the access to the chapel was a little limited. The doors were actually locked when I first approached it, but there was a lovely lady who let me in and showed me around. I didn't want to take too much of her time, so I didn't film inside, hence the voiceover here. So as we mentioned, the chapel was built by the Dubos family in memory of their son Jean, who was killed in this area in September 1916. The plaque in the floor commemorates him, and on the wall surrounding his plaque are the names of missing soldiers. Now, not every missing soldier is named on the wall here, because you did have to pay to have your family member commemorated, and of course some families wouldn't have had the ability to pay for that. So it isn't every missing soldier, but there are a lot of them on the wall, and the chapel is really fascinating, beautiful, and I recommend you visit it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video taking a look at the 3 cemeteries here in Rancourt, the French cemetery where we've rounded off this video, of course the British Cemetery just on the road there, and the German cemetery just on the other side. Really interesting place where you can see the cemeteries of the 3 nations next to each other here at Rancourt. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I found this really interesting, looking at the different places and the chapel and some of the other bits that they had here. Thank you very much for watching. I'm going to see you guys on the next video.